Hello and welcome to a bonus video. Today we're going to make maple flower infused vodka. Now this is a recipe I found in a Danish cookbook, but the recipe was pretty vague. It's like take some maple flowers, put it in vodka. So we'll talk a little more about the process and what makes it successful as we go forward. This is a lovely bittersweet shot drink. Typically, I prefer to sip it, but it also, I think, takes maybe 3-6 months to reach its full final state. So we'll talk a little bit about that too. This is one of my favorites, along with violets, rose petals, quince, and acorns. But there are some other trees that you can use. You can use birch twigs in the spring, and you can use oak twigs in the spring also, and those produce very, very different flavors. Also, green walnuts are very commonly used in Denmark also. So that's that. On to the ingredients for this, which are very simple, and we'll go ahead and get started. So we have a jar that I can seal. I have it filled almost up to the liter mark with maple flowers. I'll have a quick segment in a moment showing you maple flowers, and I'll describe how to identify them. And then of course I have a 700 milliliter bottle of vodka. In this case I decided to use Green Mark. You can use cheaper vodkas for this, because the infusion process will mellow them out a little bit, but I went ahead and used Green Mark for this one. And Green Mark is a pretty good basis for a lot of the infusions that I like to do. So I'm basically just going to take this and I'm going to pour it. If you want it to pour faster, swirl it around like this, and that helps, well, it didn't help this much. So basically just fill it in, and then we're going to seal this up and come back to it in about 3 days. I like to leave it in a cool place during this time, and then we will go ahead and filter this. After filtering it, we will go ahead and put it back in the bottle. So these are maple flowers, and they come out before the leaves are up. Welcome back. It's been 3 days. And in this time, my maple flowers have been steeping in my vodka. Now, I'm including in this a little bit of information about what maple flowers look like in the wild, or in the parks, or things like that. A very important word of caution is, don't go out and gather plants you're not familiar with. There are plenty of trees out there which look like ones which are perfectly edible, but might be poisonous. Good example being fir trees, for example, and yew trees. Fir trees are edible, yew trees are not. So with that in mind, what I usually recommend doing when you're kind of getting familiar with certain plants is to watch them for a whole year. You can typically understand then what a plant looks like in different parts of its life cycle. And, you know, if it's easy to identify a maple tree in the summer, then you already know which trees are maple trees, and you go back and you look at them in the spring and you see the flowers. So I strongly recommend going about it that way. I don't think there are very many poisonous plants that are closely resembling maple flowers. But of course, there are several trees that are not maples that kind of look similar, like sweet gum and what's it called? Sycamore, and a few plants like that. Of course, their flowers and seeds look very different, but it's important to keep in mind that some things do look different, and things do look similar, and consequently you can end up in a situation where you've got something that looks edible but in fact is poisonous. So with all of that in mind, let's go ahead and do our filtration, and then we'll talk a little bit about how the aging process, and then I'm going to do the taste test, but with last year's batch. So, church bells ringing, it's noon. What else is new? So, I have my bottle, along with the cap, from when I emptied the vodka into this here. Here is the infusion jar with the things infusing. And what I did was I took the funnel from a coffee maker, and I put a coffee filter inside, and this is what we're going to filter it on. Now from here it gets just a little complicated because of space, but we'll talk a little bit about that, and you'll get to see how I do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, I'm just going to put it up here. So what I've done here is I've taken the coffee funnel and I've put it over the bottle, and now I'm just going to pour, and now I'm just pouring the liquid in from the infusion jar. And this takes a little bit of time. I'm not going to make you sit here and watch me do it, the whole thing. Usually takes me a few minutes. And as I continue to do this, it's going to be normal that eventually the coffee filter will start to clog up a bit. Now right now it's moving really fast, and I'm not sure why. Hopefully that doesn't mean I have a hole in it. But it may clog up, and then we'll have a problem. So here we have this filtered. Now the colors will continue to darken over the next few months, and the flavors will change slightly too. This will become a little bit sweet, but relatively bitter. It's a very nice bitter. So onto the taste test. And again, I'll use last year's batch, so you don't have to wait several months. So for last year's batch, I have a later harvest. And these become a little darker and a little bit fuller bodied. So I expect this to be, this will be less, a little bit less floral and a little more bitter, but it will still have the general same bittersweet notes. So I'm going to go ahead and set up the taste test. So now for the taste test. As I say, this is last year's, the latest harvest I did. So I expect it to be a little bit more bitter. It's a little more bitter than the earlier harvest that I did, and a little darker. Also a little bit heavier on the wood, and a little lighter on the floral notes. So having said that, I'm going to taste and do my best to describe the taste to you. Now, the first thing you're going to notice in tasting this dish is this drink is the bitter note to it. This is definitely a bitter, and it is definitely in the Herbals genre of infused vodkas. Nonetheless, it has a slight sweetness to it, hints of the floral notes and hints of wood. And there's a very distinctive maple flavor here that kind of reminds me a little bit of maple syrup, but without the sweetness. So, as I say, this is one of my favorites. I strongly recommend, if this sort of drink is of interest, going ahead and trying it yourself. But again, keep in mind, watch trees for a whole year. Maple seeds are easy to identify. And once you can identify by leaf and seed, then it's easier to come back in the spring and notice when they're in flower. The flowers on maple trees come out before the leaves, so that complicates identification a little bit. But learning the trees and going ahead and doing it is well worth the rewards. I strongly recommend this. Hope you enjoy this recipe as well as I do. Hope to see you next week.